My name is Marcus. I'm 27 and I live alone in a small, one-bedroom apartment in San Diego. I moved here a little over a year ago for a new job in IT support. The place isn't anything fancy, just a basic unit on the second floor of a slightly run-down building. But it's affordable, quiet, and the location is perfect. Or, it used to feel that way. I remember the first day I moved in, August 12th, 2023. The sun was blazing. I was drenched in sweat, and I was balancing my mattress awkwardly through the hallway when I met Mr. Connolly. He lived across the hall. He was polite enough, maybe in his late 60s, pale, thin, always wearing a brown cardigan no matter the temperature. He introduced himself with a limp handshake, asked if I needed help, and then just lingered, watching me haul boxes, not saying much. I figured he was just lonely. That was the first and last time we spoke for months. I'd see him sometimes as I came and went. He never seemed to leave his apartment, but we didn't exchange more than a nod. Still, I often noticed things off, like how his door was always slightly cracked open, or how I'd sometimes hear muffled sounds through the wall, scraping, pacing, and once, what I swore was soft weeping around 2 a.m. But I'm not the type to pry. I've always been a live and let live kind of guy, so I ignored it. Everything started getting weird in early February. I was getting home from work around 6:45 p.m. It was already dark, and as I reached my door, I noticed something odd. There was a sticky note taped just below my peephole. It read, in sloppy handwriting, "I see you watching. You're not as quiet as you think." My first thought was that it was a prank, maybe some kid in the building messing around. But I'm on the second floor, and this place doesn't allow kids. And the note looked old. The ink was slightly smudged, like it had been written in haste or with a shaking hand. I pulled it off and checked around the hallway. Nothing. Mr. Connolly's door was open, just a crack, as usual. I knocked on his door gently. "Hey, Mr. Connolly, everything okay?" No response. I knocked a bit harder. The door creaked open a little more, but I couldn't see inside. Just a hallway cloaked in shadows, the faint scent of something stale, like mold and mothballs. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept thinking about the note. Who would leave that? Why me? I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but it didn't stop there. Over the next few days, I tried to return to normal. I threw the note in the trash, brushed off the feeling. I told myself maybe someone left it on the wrong door, maybe it wasn't even about me. But then, things escalated. On February 8th, I came home to find my front door unlocked. I always triple-check that lock, habit from living in rougher neighborhoods. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the handle. I slowly pushed the door open with the side of my hand. Everything inside looked undisturbed. The lights were off, blinds were closed, and there was no sign of a break-in. Still, I did a sweep of the place. Checked under the bed, inside the closet, the bathroom. Nothing missing, no forced entry. I even tested the lock, thinking maybe it was faulty, but it worked fine. That night I shoved a chair under the doorknob before bed. At around 3:13 a.m., I woke up to a noise. It was soft, rhythmic, and close. Not from the wall, from the hallway. Like breathing. Slow, unsteady breathing right outside my door. I sat up in bed, holding my own breath, straining to hear. It lasted maybe 15 seconds. Then I heard a soft shuffle and silence. I grabbed my phone and crept toward the door. I didn't want to make a sound. I looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just the empty, dimly lit hallway. But as I leaned closer, I realized something, the faintest shadow just to the left. Someone was standing flush against the wall, just out of view of the peephole. I froze. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to open the door. I didn't want to speak. I just backed away slowly, locked myself in the bathroom with the phone in hand. I almost called the police, but what would I say? I think someone might be standing quietly in the hallway. They'd probably laugh. Eventually, I sat in the tub until dawn. That morning, I left for work early. Mr. Connolly's door was shut, completely shut for the first time in months. That alone should have made me feel safer. It didn't. The following week was quiet, almost too quiet. No noises through the wall, no notes, nothing out of place. I began to wonder if I imagined all of it. Stress, maybe. But on February 15th, something new happened. When I got home, my apartment smelled weird. faintly metallic, like rust or blood. I checked the sink, the bathroom, even under the fridge. Nothing. Then I walked into the bedroom. All of my drawers were pulled open just slightly, not enough to notice at first glance, maybe half an inch, and on my pillow was a new sticky note. It said, "You breathe loud when you sleep." That's when I completely lost it. I called the landlord, demanded he check the security footage, but he just shrugged, said the cameras in our hallway hadn't worked in years. I asked about Mr. Connolly, said I had concerns. He told me Mr. Connolly had lived here since 1998, quiet guy, paid on time, never had complaints. I tried calling the police. Again, I had nothing concrete, no forced entry, no actual threat. Just a few creepy notes and an unlocked door. They took a report, said they'd make a note of it. I didn't sleep for the next 3 nights. I started keeping a knife under my pillow. I even considered installing a camera inside my apartment. But part of me was afraid of what it might actually record. That fear was justified, because on February 19th, everything snapped. February 19th was a Sunday. I had stayed home all day. I didn't go to work, didn't even go outside. I just sat on the couch with every light in the apartment on, trying to pretend I wasn't spiraling into some kind of mental breakdown. Around 11:45 p.m., I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom when I heard a sound. A soft click, like metal against metal. I turned off the water and listened. Nothing. Then again, click. It was the sound of my front doorknob turning slowly. My stomach dropped. I stepped out of the bathroom and stared down the short hallway that led to the front door. It was moving. The doorknob was turning. Deliberately, slowly, like someone was trying to open it as silently as possible. I bolted forward and shouted, "I'm calling the cops." The knob froze. I didn't hear footsteps running away. I didn't hear a door slam across the hall. Just silence. I waited 30 seconds, then ripped the door open, knife in hand. The hallway was empty, but Mr. Connolly's door, directly across from mine, was now wide open. The light inside his apartment was off. Just a dim blue glow from a television flickering inside. I stepped closer and called out, "Mr. Connolly." No answer. I felt my hand sweating on the handle of the knife. My heartbeat was so loud it echoed in my ears. Against every instinct I had, I stepped into the threshold of his apartment and leaned inside. His living room was immaculate, like a showroom. A beige couch with clear plastic covering, a glass coffee table, one old flat-screen TV showing static. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Across the room, directly facing his couch, was a curtain. Not a window, just a heavy gray curtain hanging in the middle of the wall. Behind it, something bulged. Not a shape I could immediately define, but it looked dense, like a thick form just behind the fabric. I couldn't see feet beneath it. Whatever it was stood motionless. I was too afraid to breathe. That's when the curtain moved, just slightly, a small sway like someone shifting their weight behind it. I turned and bolted out of his apartment, slammed my door shut, locked it, shoved the chair under the knob, and backed into the bedroom. I called the police again. This time, I didn't care how I sounded. They arrived 10 minutes later. I could hear them knocking on his door, calling his name. After a moment, one of them asked the landlord to unlock it. I stood behind my peephole watching. The police went in, flashlights on. After about 5 minutes, one of the officers came back out and knocked on my door. "Sir, you said you saw someone behind a curtain?" "Yeah," I told him, heart racing. Someone was definitely standing there. He nodded slowly. "There's no one in the apartment, no signs of forced entry, and there is no curtain." I blinked at him. "What?" He repeated it. "There's no curtain, just a wall." I insisted. I described the layout, the couch, the TV, the curtain hanging in the middle of the far wall. I described the bulge behind it, the movement. He looked at me for a long moment, then finally said, "Sir, there's nothing like that in the unit. And this Connolly guy, he hasn't lived here in over 4 years." My stomach turned. I asked, "What do you mean?" "He passed away. Stroke. February 2019. I stood there frozen. The air felt like it had been sucked out of my lungs. He added, "You sure you saw him?" I stammered something. "Maybe. I don't know." He shook his head, gave me the number of a department therapist just in case, and left. After they were gone, I stepped into the hallway again. Mr. Connolly's door was shut. There was no nameplate, no welcome mat, just an old peeling door that looked like no one had touched it in years. I went back inside. That night I packed a bag. I didn't sleep, but just before I left I had to check something. I opened my closet, crouched down, and lifted the carpet at the corner, a place I never really looked at before. I don't know what made me do it. Call it instinct. Under the carpet was a loose floorboard, and under that, a small velvet pouch. Inside it, a collection of sticky notes, all in the same shaky handwriting. "I see you watching. You breathe loud when you sleep." One simply said, "Don't look behind the curtain." I left the building that morning without looking back. I checked into a motel across town and stayed there for 2 weeks. I didn't go to work. I didn't tell anyone where I was. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that curtain again, swaying ever so slightly. Felt that cold, stale air in Connolly's apartment. Heard that deliberate turning of my doorknob. I went back to my apartment only once, to break the lease and collect the rest of my things. I went during the day, brought a friend with me, and was in and out in under 30 minutes. I never saw anyone in the hallway. I never saw Connolly again. But the weirdest part happened months later, in June. I got a call from the property manager. I almost didn't answer. When I picked up, he sounded hesitant. "Hey Marcus, sorry to bother you, but, something came up during renovations and I thought you should know." He explained that they were redoing the drywall in the apartment across the hall, what used to be Connolly's unit. When the workers tore out the false panel on the far wall, the one where I saw the curtain, they found a small hidden space, maybe 3 feet deep, sealed from inside. There was no curtain there, but there was a wooden stool, and dozens of empty food containers, water bottles and crumpled tissues, and a camera tripod. No camera, just the tripod, pointing through a narrow drilled hole that led straight into my apartment wall, directly into my bedroom. He said it looked like someone had been sitting in that space watching. For how long? No one could say. The hole had been patched from inside my apartment long before I moved in. You'd never notice it unless you peeled off the paint layer by layer. I asked him if they found anything else. He hesitated, then said, "We found a few more notes, taped behind the panel." He didn't want to tell me what they said, but I insisted. He took a breath. The one on top said, "He moved the knife. Use the other way in." I felt the phone shake in my hand. I asked, "Was there someone in that wall, living there?" He said it looked that way, but they couldn't confirm who or when. The police were called again. They took photos, ran tests, dusted for fingerprints. Nothing. No name. No identity. Not even a clue if it was Connolly or someone else entirely. All they knew was that someone had been watching me sleep for weeks, maybe months, and they had access to the inside of my apartment. The camera hole. It had been cleaned. The area wiped down. Whoever was behind that wall, they knew what they were doing. That's when I remembered something else. Something that didn't hit me until that night, while I was trying to fall asleep in yet another temporary apartment. The very first sticky note I found, the one that said, "I see you watching," had been taped below my peephole. Not over it, below it. Like someone knew exactly how tall I was. Like someone had spent time studying my movements, learning how I looked through the door, how I breathed when I slept, how often I checked my lock. I thought back to that bulge behind the curtain, the slight sway, the scent in the air like body odor trapped in old fabric. That wasn't a curtain. That was a sheet, hung to hide someone watching. And now, the final thing I can't stop thinking about. That closet, that pouch, those notes. How did they get under my floorboard? I didn't put them there. I never moved that carpet, never lifted that wood. Someone did it while I was sleeping. I moved far away since then, changed cities, jobs, even my name on social media. I sleep with a motion detector now. I have locks on every window, door, closet, anything that could be accessed from the outside. But some nights, especially the quiet ones, I swear I still hear the creak of a floorboard, a breath behind the wall, a silence too perfect. And I keep asking myself, what would have happened if I had pulled back that curtain? My name is Rachel. I'm 31 and I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been working as a bartender for about 6 years now. I usually finish my shifts late, midnight or later, and I normally drive myself home. But on March 18th, 2024, I made the stupid decision of accepting a last-minute shift after drinking earlier that day. I wasn't drunk, but I wasn't sober either. I didn't feel right driving, so I left my car behind the bar, ordered an Uber, and waited outside in the alley behind the building. It was 2:12 a.m. when the car pulled up. I remember the exact time because my phone battery was almost dead, 3%, and I saw the timestamp when I unlocked it to double-check the license plate. Everything matched. Black Honda Civic, plate number 7TQ351. The app said the driver's name was Dennis, 487 stars. I got in the back seat and said hi. He didn't say anything, just gave a little nod in the rearview mirror and started driving. Totally normal at first. The car was clean, AC was cold, and music was playing low, some instrumental jazz I didn't recognize. I stared out the window thinking about how tired I was, how I had to come back early the next day to get my car. Then I noticed we weren't taking the usual route. I live in Arcadia, about 20 minutes from downtown. The fastest way is via the 202 freeway. But this guy took side streets. I figured maybe there was construction or traffic, it happens. But it still felt weird. I leaned forward. Hey, is the freeway closed or something? He didn't answer right away, just kept his eyes on the road, his hands tight on the wheel. Then he said, yeah, just that. Flat. No explanation. I felt this little twinge in my chest, like a nerve tightening. I looked out the window again. We were passing through some industrial area I didn't recognize. No lights, empty streets, warehouses. I opened my Uber app to track the ride. That's when I saw it. The ride wasn't active anymore. No route. No estimated time of arrival. No in-progress indicator. Just the option to rate the trip, like it had already ended. I blinked hard, refreshed the app. Still the same. I swallowed and leaned forward again. My voice cracked a little. Hey, why did the app end the ride? No response. Dennis? I said louder. He glanced at me in the mirror. What? The app says the ride's over, but we're not at my house. He looked away and kept driving. Signal must have dropped. Don't worry. That was a lie. I looked at my signal. 2 bars, not great but enough. And then I noticed something else. There was no phone mount on his dash. Every Uber driver I've ever seen had one, with their phone showing the route. But not this guy. His dashboard was empty. I gripped my bag and quietly slipped my hand inside, feeling for anything sharp. All I had was a pen. That's when he took a left turn, onto an unlit dirt road. No houses, no street signs, just desert brush and shadows. I said, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" He didn't answer. I shouted, "Stop the car, let me out." Still nothing. I reached for the door handle. Locked. Child locks. I started slamming my palm on the window, screaming, "Let me out." He didn't even flinch. That's when the car slowed down and came to a full stop in the middle of the dirt road. And he turned around to face me. He turned to face me, both hands still gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. His eyes locked onto mine. They weren't angry. They weren't wild. They were empty. Like he wasn't even seeing me. Like I was a problem to solve. I froze. He didn't say anything. Just stared. I broke the silence first. My voice was shaking, but I made it sharp. "What are you doing?" He blinked slowly and said, "You shouldn't be out this late." Then he turned back around, put the car in park, and shut off the engine. The silence that followed was brutal. No engine hum, no music. Just the sound of my own breathing getting louder and more panicked. I could hear the desert outside, quiet wind, maybe a cricket. I tried the door handle again, still locked. I reached forward and hit the central lock button on the driver's door. Nothing happened. It had been disabled. That's when I realized something I hadn't noticed in the dark. The child locks weren't the only modification. The window controls were missing. He had stripped the panel where the switches should be. I couldn't roll the windows down, couldn't open the doors. I was sealed inside. I felt like I was suffocating. I grabbed my phone, 1% battery, opened the dial pad, started to type 91, and the screen went black. Dead. He said, "Don't panic." That pushed me over the edge. I screamed at the top of my lungs, started kicking the seat in front of me, punching the window with the bottom of my fist, anything to make noise, to break glass, to signal anyone. He didn't move, just sat still. Then he said, "If you stop, I'll let you go." I froze. He repeated it. "Stop moving. I'll let you out." My heart was slamming against my chest like a warning bell, but I stopped, slowly, watching him. He started the engine again. We sat there for 5 seconds, 10, and then he put the car in reverse and backed out of the dirt road. We got back onto a side street and started driving again. Still no main roads, still no lights, but something had shifted. I stayed frozen, silent, watching every movement of his hands, every flick of his eyes in the mirror. After 5 minutes, he turned onto a residential street I recognized. It was maybe 10 blocks from my apartment. I saw a gas station coming up. I leaned forward again, trying to sound calm. "Can you let me out here?" He didn't answer, but he pulled into the gas station. I didn't wait. The second he slowed to a near stop, I unlocked the door manually, the only one that still had a working latch, and threw it open. I stumbled out, landed hard on my shoulder, and ran inside the gas station without looking back. The guy didn't follow me. I told the clerk what happened. He called the police. They arrived 20 minutes later. I gave them everything, the license plate, the name from the app, the time, even the description of the route. They asked if I still had the app open. I didn't. My phone was dead. One officer tapped on his tablet and checked the Uber system, and that's when things got worse. "Ma'am," he said, "there's no record of a ride under your account for tonight." "What?" I said. He turned the screen toward me. My last Uber ride had been 2 nights ago. There was no history, no canceled trips, no completed ride for March 18th. I showed them my screenshots from earlier that night, but none had saved to my phone. The app had been glitchy earlier, I remembered that. The only proof I had was my memory. They ran the plate I'd written down. It came back registered to a 1997 Ford pickup, not a Honda Civic. Different make, different model, wrong color, outdated registration. I asked, "Could it have been a fake plate?" The officer nodded. "Yeah, people do it more than you'd think." That's when it hit me. He was never a real Uber driver. He must have seen me waiting behind the bar. Maybe even guessed what I was doing, or maybe he had the app himself. Maybe he knew how to look like a driver well enough to trick someone late at night, half tired, half drunk, just trying to get home. And he had a car with no handles, no switches, no tracking, no cameras. It was built for this. They took my statement, said they'd investigate, but I could tell, by their tone, that they didn't expect to find anything. The plate was probably a fake. The name, Dennis, might have been real, or might have been something he overheard at a bar weeks ago. The truth is, he planned it. He had the timing, the car, the route, the silence, and the scariest part, he let me go. I don't know why. I don't know if I passed some test in his head, or if I reminded him of someone, or if he just got bored, but he let me go, and I haven't stopped thinking about what would have happened if he hadn't. For days after the incident, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see that look on his face, the blank, quiet calculation, the way he stared at me like I was nothing more than a decision to be made. I kept going back over every second, trying to remember any detail I could have missed, something he said, a scar, a smell, a sound, anything, but the truth is, he barely spoke, he barely moved, and that silence was what made him terrifying. I kept in touch with the police, but their updates got fewer and further between. I went to the precinct twice, unannounced, just to check if there had been progress. Both times the answer was the same. No leads, no hits on the plate. No cameras in the area that caught anything useful. My ride didn't exist in Uber's system. One detective, a younger guy named Ruiz, was the only one who treated me like I wasn't crazy. He said, This isn't the first time we've seen something like this. He called it a ghost ride. Someone mimics a real Uber or just waits for people who look like they're waiting for a ride. They don't have to hack anything. Most people don't double-check beyond the plate and the car color, especially if they're tired or tipsy. He said Phoenix had 3 similar cases over the past 6 months. One woman was never found, another escaped by jumping out of the moving vehicle and breaking her ankle. The third got dropped off in the middle of nowhere, hours from the city, and found wandering the desert. None of them had useful descriptions. All the men were quiet, ordinary-looking, and the victims remembered almost nothing except for the fear. Ruiz showed me a map. Red pins marked the locations of the pickups. Mine was the furthest south. He said, "This guy's methodical, too careful to be spontaneous, and he's getting better." I asked him what that meant. He hesitated. "Means he's rehearsing." Those words haunted me, because that's exactly how it felt, like I'd been part of a trial run. He had total control over the situation. He even knew when to stop. And maybe that's what he wanted, to feel the power of giving me back my freedom, like a god. For the next 2 weeks, I stayed with a friend. I didn't trust my apartment. I didn't trust being alone. I changed my number, deleted all rideshare apps, bought pepper spray. I even considered getting a gun, something I never thought I'd do. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew who I was. He had watched me long enough to make me trust him, at least for those first few minutes. He drove the right car, said nothing, just like most drivers, didn't make eye contact, didn't make mistakes. He had studied this. One night, while staying at my friend's place, I decided to check something. I logged into my Uber account from a laptop and accessed my ride history, not just completed trips, but canceled rides. There it was. March 18th, 2:09 a.m. Ride canceled. The pickup location? Behind my bar, the exact alley I was standing in. That meant someone had accepted my ride, then canceled it after seeing me. Someone who still showed up anyway. Someone who wanted me to think the ride was legitimate long enough to get into their car. That was confirmation. I wasn't crazy. This wasn't random. He was waiting for someone like me. And that night I gave him the perfect opportunity. I took a screenshot and sent it to Detective Ruiz. He responded 10 minutes later. "Got it. Stay somewhere safe. If anything happens, anything, call me directly." 3 days later I got another message. "We may have a lead." Detective Ruiz called me later that day. He said a man had been caught trying to pick up a woman outside a club in Tempe. Same tactic. Dark-colored Honda Civic. No Uber registration. The woman got suspicious and took a photo of his plate before backing out. She gave a description. White male, mid-40s, shaved head, no distinguishing tattoos, soft-spoken. The plate? It didn't match mine, but it was just 1 digit off. Police pulled security footage from nearby gas stations and traffic cams. They found images of the Civic circling blocks near several late-night venues. Bars, restaurants, clubs, always idling, always alone. One clip showed him pulling into a parking lot, waiting for almost an hour, then driving off without ever picking anyone up. Ruiz called him a predator of opportunity. But the kicker? They found the car 2 days later, abandoned in an industrial zone off I-17, wiped clean, no fingerprints, no DNA, no plates, no registration. It was like it had never belonged to anyone. Inside, they found something under the front passenger seat. A burner phone, no SIM card, no contact list, just one image in the gallery. It was a photo of me, blurry, taken at night. I'm outside the bar, leaning against the wall, looking at my phone. Probably the moment I opened the Uber app. Ruiz said they believe he took it to confirm I was the target. I asked if that meant he'd been following me, watching me before I even ordered the ride. He said, "We think he watches a lot of people." I never saw the image myself. I didn't want to. After that call, I spiraled for a few days. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I jumped at every car door, every brake light. Every time someone pulled into a parking lot and sat for too long, I panicked. I kept thinking, how many women had he picked up? How many didn't get away? What if I had said one thing differently, looked the wrong direction, Sat in the front seat. I moved out of Phoenix 3 weeks later. Started over in a smaller city. I don't go out alone anymore. I don't trust rideshare apps. I don't stand in alleys waiting for anything. And I never ride in a car without checking every lock, every window, and every route. Twice. The part that sticks with me the most isn't that he was out there. It's that he's probably still out there. Because even with the burner phone, the fake plates, the surveillance footage, they never found him. He just vanished. Like smoke. He didn't make a mistake that night. Letting me go wasn't an accident. It was a choice. Maybe I wasn't what he wanted. Maybe I reminded him of someone. Maybe the thrill was just in the control. But that's the part that keeps me awake. The idea that someone could get that close to you, close enough to study your habits, learn your routes, mimic an app you trust, and never leave a trace. Sometimes when I'm walking to my car after work and it's just a little too quiet, when a car slows down a little too much near a curb, or when I feel eyes on me that I can't quite find, I wonder if it's him again, not to take me, just to see if I remember, just to remind me that next time he might not let me go. My name is Aaron. I'm 34 years old, divorced, and I live alone in a small house outside Asheville, North Carolina. It's not isolated, just a quiet suburban street with modest houses, old trees, and the kind of neighbors who wave but don't really know your name. I moved in after the divorce hoping for a reset. I work remotely as a copy editor, which means I spend most of my time in the house. At first it felt peaceful, the kind of peace that comes after chaos. A space that was finally mine. The house was built in the 1960s. 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, creaky floors, and a narrow pull-down ladder that leads to the attic. I'd never been up there. No reason to. It was dusty, unlit, and filled with decades of insulation and cobwebs. The inspector had checked it before I bought the place, said it was structurally sound, just old. The first time I heard the noise was in early November. It was 1:30 in the morning. I was watching a documentary in bed, earbuds in. I had just taken them out and was reaching to turn off the lamp when I heard it, a soft creak from above me. 2 slow, deliberate steps. Then nothing. I live alone. I froze, my hand still on the lamp switch. I told myself it was the house settling. That's what everyone says, right? But it didn't sound random. It sounded paced. I lay there for 10 full minutes, barely breathing, staring at the ceiling. Nothing. No more sounds. Eventually, I forced myself to sleep. I didn't want to seem paranoid. Didn't want to be one of those women who thinks every bump in the night is a ghost or a burglar. But the next night, it happened again. Same time. Around 1:30 a.m. 3 slow steps. Then silence. I sat up this time. Turned off the white noise machine and listened, heart racing, creak, creak, pause, then a sharper sound like weight shifting on wood. I turned on all the lights in the house, grabbed a broom, because of course I don't own a weapon, and stood under the attic door in the hallway. It was shut, the rope pull dangling still. I stared at it for what felt like hours, trying to find the courage to pull it down, but I didn't. I told myself it had to be a squirrel, maybe a raccoon. But the pacing continued, night after night, never in the day, never when I had guests over, only between 1 and 2 a.m., and when the house was still and dark, and I was completely alone. Then, on November 11th, I found the first real clue. I was dusting in the hallway and noticed a small pile of white flakes near the attic pull cord, like plaster or drywall. I looked up and saw a faint line scratched into the ceiling panel. Something had been pushed from above. I stood there staring, realizing the implication. Something or someone had moved that panel. After noticing the flakes of plaster and the faint scratch in the attic panel, I stood there for a long time, broom still in hand, feeling that slow wave of adrenaline creep up my spine. I wasn't imagining things. The panel had moved. That meant something had applied pressure from the inside. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept all the lights on. I sat at my kitchen table with a flashlight and my phone on standby, reading forums about animals in attics, trying to find an explanation that didn't involve someone living above me. I finally called a pest control company the next morning. A guy named Troy came out that afternoon, middle-aged, friendly, looked like he'd been crawling through dark spaces for a living for years. I told him what I'd heard and what I saw. He nodded. Could be raccoons. Could be rats. Sometimes squirrels get in and it sounds like footsteps. I followed him down the hallway as he extended the pull-down ladder to the attic and climbed up with a flashlight. The silence while he was up there was unbearable. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, he poked his head down and said, "Well, there's good news and bad news." "What's the good news?" I asked. "No infestation, not a single dropping or nest up here. No bugs either. It's clean." "And the bad news?" He frowned. "Someone's been up here." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He climbed all the way down and motioned for me to step aside. "There are boot prints in the dust. Big ones, maybe size 11 or 12. And there's a flattened space near the corner of the attic, old sleeping bag, empty water bottles, granola bar wrappers." I stared at him, completely still. He added, "It's not recent, maybe a few months old, but someone was definitely up there at some point. Could they still be?" He shook his head. "I checked every corner. Nobody's up there now. But that didn't calm me, because whoever had been up there, they were up there long enough to sleep, to eat, to hide." I asked him if he could install a motion-activated camera in the attic. He said he didn't do that kind of work, but he gave me the name of a guy who did security systems. I called that guy, Jason, and had him come out the next day. He was younger, maybe late 20s, and took the situation seriously. He installed a motion cam with infrared up in the attic and hooked it to an app on my phone. If anything moved up there, I'd get a ping and a clip sent directly to my device. For 3 nights, nothing happened. No noises, no creaks, no alerts. I started to breathe again. Maybe whoever was up there had left months ago. Maybe the steps I'd heard were just echoes in my own head. I began sleeping with the lights off again. Then, on the 4th night, I got a notification at 1:41 a.m. while lying in bed. "Motion detected. Attic cam." I sat up so fast I felt dizzy. My hands were already shaking as I opened the app. The screen loaded. At first, just grainy black and white footage of insulation and beams. Nothing moving. Then, from the bottom right corner of the frame, a hand appeared. Just a hand. Pale. Dirty fingernails. It reached up slowly and adjusted the camera, tilting it slightly away. Then it disappeared. That was it. A 5-second clip. But it told me everything I needed to know. Someone was still up there. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe. I grabbed my keys, phone, and shoes and walked out of the house in my pajamas. I didn't stop until I was sitting in my car in the driveway, doors locked. That's when I finally called 911. The dispatcher kept asking if I was sure someone was in the attic. I told her I had footage. She sent officers within 10 minutes. They cleared the house while I waited outside. Flashlights through windows, muffled voices, the pull-down ladder creaking. One officer came out and said they found signs of recent presence in the attic. Prints, a plastic bottle, more wrappers. But again, no one was there. He said whoever it was had probably left through the crawlspace access that led to the backyard, one I didn't even know existed. He also said it wasn't the first time they'd heard of cases like this, people living in attics, quietly, carefully, sometimes for weeks, sometimes longer. He suggested I stay somewhere else for a few days. They'd run extra patrols, but there was no one to arrest unless I caught the intruder in the act. I packed a bag and went to stay with a friend. But before I left, I downloaded all the video footage, and I watched that 5-second clip over and over. There was something in that hand, something off. It was bruised, and there were scratches on the forearm, long and jagged, like it had crawled through something sharp, or like someone had tried to climb through drywall. And then it hit me. The panel in the hallway hadn't just been pushed. It had been replaced, carefully, gently, like someone was trying to stay hidden, but not completely. I stayed at my friend Vanessa's place for 5 nights. She lives across town in a well-lit condo with 2 dogs and a husband who used to be in the army. Exactly the kind of place you go when you don't feel safe in your own home. I barely slept. Every night, I kept checking the camera app, watching the grainy attic footage, hoping to catch something, hoping not to. And then, on the 6th night, I got a motion alert at 3:07 a.m. But this time, the camera feed didn't load, just a black screen. The thumbnail said, "Footage unavailable." I tried again. Same thing. The camera had been disabled or destroyed. My breath got caught in my throat. I felt cold all over, that kind of cold that seeps into your bones when you know something is happening and you're not there to stop it. I called Jason, the security guy, first thing in the morning. He said the camera had gone offline, not because of a power cut, but because someone had manually unplugged it. He offered to come over and install a new one. But I said no. I wasn't going back. Not yet. That day, I made a decision. I was going to sell the house. I called my realtor, scheduled a meeting, and told her I wanted to put it on the market as is. I didn't care if I lost money. I just didn't want to sleep under that roof again. But before I walked away for good, I needed to go back one last time. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I arrived around noon. Daylight always makes things feel safer, even when they aren't. I stepped inside with pepper spray in one hand and my phone recording video in the other. Every corner of the house looked exactly as I'd left it, except the hallway. Directly under the attic pull-down ladder, there were new flakes of plaster on the floor. I looked up. The panel was slightly off-center, just enough to notice if you were already staring at it, just enough to suggest someone had opened it recently. I took a deep breath and pulled the ladder down. It creaked louder than I expected. I climbed halfway up, shining a flashlight into the darkness. I couldn't see much, just the same wooden beams, fiberglass insulation, and my now disabled camera hanging loose from a nail. But then, on the far side of the attic, something glinted. I climbed up the rest of the way and crawled across the boards, careful not to fall through the ceiling. The glint had come from a small metal box, like a tackle box, old and rusted. I opened it. Inside were a small pocket knife, a disposable toothbrush, a cracked phone screen, just the glass, no phone, and a notebook, water-stained and warped. I flipped through the notebook. Most of the pages were unintelligible, just scribbles, childlike drawings, symbols. But on the last page, written clearly in jagged handwriting, was a single sentence. "I like when you talk to yourself." I dropped it. The air suddenly felt too thick to breathe, like it was pressing against my skin. I backed away, heart racing, trying not to scream, and that's when I noticed something else. Footprints in the dust. They weren't from the pest guy. These were fresh, clear, and they didn't come from the attic hatch. They led to it, which meant whoever made them had come from somewhere else. I followed the prints with my light. They curved around the insulation toward the far wall, and that's when I saw it. A cut in the insulation, not big, not obvious, but just large enough for someone to squeeze through. The wood panel behind it was slightly ajar. I crouched, trembling, and reached out to pull it back. Behind the wall was a small crawl space, just wide enough to lie down in. Inside were blankets, old fast food wrappers, and a small battery-powered fan. Someone had lived there, recently. And then I saw the most disturbing part. Photos taped to the wood panel. Photos of me, sleeping, watching TV, sitting on the couch. All taken from inside the house. From angles I never noticed. From vents, from cracks, from behind partially opened doors. I couldn't breathe. I turned and scrambled out of the attic so fast I almost slipped. I didn't even close the hatch. I just ran out the front door and into my car, locked it, and drove straight to the police station. This time they took me seriously. They sent officers immediately. But by the time they searched the attic, the crawl space was empty. The blanket, the photos, the box, gone. All that remained were the footprints, which they documented and photographed. They found signs of someone using the wall vent system to move between the attic and crawl space. It had been a perfect hiding spot, hidden from view, impossible to hear unless you were directly beneath it. The intruder had likely been living there on and off for weeks, maybe longer. I asked them how that was possible. How can someone live in your attic, take photos of you, leave notes, and just disappear without a trace? Their answer was chilling. Because people like this are careful. They don't need much. They watch, they wait, they learn your patterns. And the longer they stay, the harder they are to find. After the police finished their sweep of the house, they urged me to stay elsewhere until they could complete a more thorough investigation. I didn't argue. I didn't even return to pack. I left with what I had on me and checked into a hotel under a different name. I wasn't just scared. I felt invaded, violated in a way I couldn't explain. Someone had watched me brush my teeth, sleep, walk from the shower to my closet in a towel. He'd known my patterns, what time I got up, when I was most distracted, where I kept my keys. He'd probably heard every private phone call I ever made in that house. But what haunted me most wasn't just the fact that he'd lived above me. It was the fact that I'd spoken to him. That note in the journal, "I like when you talk to yourself," that wasn't just creepy. That was specific, because I do talk to myself, not often. But when I'm anxious or editing a document out loud, I'll murmur through sentences, fix wording aloud. He had heard it, remembered it, wrote it down. He wasn't just hiding up there. He was listening, studying. A week passed with no new sightings, no new evidence. The crawl space had been emptied with precision. Whoever he was, he had planned an exit. No fingerprints, no DNA, no name. The police eventually filed it as a long-term, unlawful occupancy with intent to stalk. They said without a suspect, they couldn't charge anyone. They offered to install surveillance, but I declined, because I had already made up my mind. I was never going back there. I sold the house in December. Disclosure laws required me to share any known security breaches or break-ins, so I wrote it in the vaguest terms possible. The buyers didn't ask for more detail. The day I went back to hand off the keys, I arrived with a locksmith and a realtor. I didn't step inside. I just waited on the porch while they finished the paperwork. But while the realtor walked through the house one final time, he came back holding something in his hand. It was a single Polaroid photo found tucked behind the water heater in the laundry room. It showed a portion of my living room from behind the couch. And in the corner, you could see my head, just the top, as I bent over to plug in my phone. The angle of the photo meant the person was standing inside the house when it was taken, not in the attic, not in the crawl space, inside. He'd been coming down, walking among my things, breathing the same air, and I never knew. I couldn't even speak. I just turned and left. I've never set foot on that property again. Today, I live in a new state, a different home, no attic, no crawl space, every vent sealed, every room checked. Every night before bed, I sweep through the house like clockwork, under beds, inside closets, behind shower curtains. People laugh when I tell them that. They say I'm paranoid. They say those kinds of things don't happen. But they do, and not in the way you think. Not with jump scares and loud noises and masked figures. The real horror is quiet. It paces at 1:30 in the morning. It crouches behind insulation. It listens while you talk to yourself and thinks of ways to become part of your routine without you ever knowing. Sometimes I think about how many nights he must have watched me sleep, how many times I sat inches away from someone I never knew was there. And the worst part, I never heard him leave.